Okay, so we are live and I'll be assigning you a host. Okay,
Great.
thank you. Oh, I apologize for that. I forgot to make myself a co-host.
That's
Sorry
okay.
for that,
I'll
Bob.
take
Okay, so we are live for today. Is this your first class for today, Bob?
Yes, it is. I take my Friday and Saturday off for just to rest up, and then Sunday I do. They seem to always have me scheduled for about two classes. This one, and they seem to be pretty consistent. This one on home networks, and the other one is on virtual backgrounds for Zoom, which always seems popular.
Mm. I've been with you on that class and I remember having like 40 students once. That was like Wednesday
Yeah,
last
yeah. It's
week.
usually,
Yeah.
I've had as many as 50 or 60 in the class.
Oh.
And I think as it gets warmer weather, I think class enrollments are lowering down a little bit, but also people take a lot of classes and they're always looking for something new. But there's about 300 classes people can take. I guess the fitness ones are usually pretty well occupied. Is that right?
Yes, especially the yoga classes in Qigong. Introduction to Qigong once had like up to 40 students too,
Oh,
even more sometimes.
okay. Well, I recommended Get Set Up to Christina Shafton. I don't know if you've ever been a TA for any of her
Yes,
classes.
yes, I've been with Christina.
And she was actually one of my fitness instructors at the gym I used to go to. But the
Hmm.
gym shut down as a result of COVID. Okay, would you mind managing the waiting room for me, Kim, and letting
Sure
people in?
thing.
Thank you.
Also, don't forget to click the record button.
Good idea. Let me take care of that. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Hello, Yvonne. Hello, Arthur. Kathy, we've got a few people
Hi,
getting
Bob. Good
getting
morning.
Hi. How is virtual backgrounds working for you, Yvonne?
Oh, I want to change it, but I don't know how to do it now.
Oh, okay. Okay. Hello, Arthur. How are you?
Doing good today. How are you doing?
Good, good. Where are you located, Arthur?
Michigan, not too far from Detroit.
Okay, okay.
You look younger today. How are you doing?
Well, I went on a 35-mile bike ride yesterday, so that probably took a few years off.
I'm having a leg problem. I hope to see a doctor this week so I can get back. I wouldn't ride a bike that far, but I would ride a bike again.
You work your way up to it. Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, yeah. So it's a good day off for me to get. I ride with a group, and we went
Oh,
up to uh, a place in Southern Cal. I'm in Southern California, so
yep.
we rode on the bike trails up to Old Town Monrovia, which I'd
Wow.
never been to before. So it's kind of an interesting. They're starting to open things back up a little bit. You know, they have some outdoor cafes that are opening up and some retail stores that can let people in and things like that. So it's slow, but it's starting to get open. We have Kim from Get Set Up on our call today with us. She's a teaching assistant. She's available to help out with any questions or issues or technical difficulties or anything like that. She'll try and post some things if we find that there's some good reference guides or anything like that. She's going to be managing the waiting room for me. And
Very good.
yep, yeah. So while we're waiting a minute or two to get people in. I'm just curious, Yvonne and Arthur, and you're on camera. I'm wondering if you have any questions that you had about networks that you're hoping I will cover today. Anything that, or is it just a day where?
I have a question, but it's not with networks.
Oh, okay.
I have a laptop, which is a year and a half old. Is that sufficient for me to get the virtual backgrounds, or do I have to upgrade?
Well, even if you bought
It's a
computer, Yvonne was
generation Core i5.
it's a i5. Well, it should be okay. It depends on what i5 model it is. I mean, Zoom's virtual background requirements gives you some information on what you can do. Well, you're using virtual backgrounds now, right?
Yeah.
So this is what you'll get with it. Yeah.
Okay, I don't need to upgrade then.
No, not really. Not really. It's probably fast enough.
Thank you.
It'd be better to get a green screen or something like that if you needed it. Arthur, do you have any specific questions about networking?
I don't, but I've got a lot to learn about what you're going to tell us today.
Okay. Hi, Deanna. How are you? Go ahead and unmute yourself so we can say hi. I'm just curious if you have any specific questions about networking. Oh, she's not sure how to unmute. You're on your phone. If you tap the phone, you should see a little microphone on there. If you tap the microphone, it should let you talk.
Okay.
Hey, all right. Welcome, Deanna. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
It works. Sometimes I give people instructions and sometimes, but you're on the ball today. I can tell. Okay. I don't know why you're even in this class, to be honest. You seem to have such a good grasp of technology, right?
No.
Are you just here to kind of learn a little bit about networking and what all these things mean?
Yes.
Great. Hi, Loretta. How are you? Good to see you.
Hi, Bob.
Where are you calling in from?
Charlotte, North Carolina.
Really? Oh, wow. Okay. We have an Eastern time zone participant. I know Kathy, Luann, Carolee, and I have somebody calling in on their phone with a 704 area code. If they want to unmute themselves, I'll put in their name if they want me to for their name. But you don't have to if you don't want to. We just like to know who people are. Loretta, did you have anything specific you're hoping to get out of home networks or anything?
Yes, I bought a new tablet and I cannot get Zoom on it. I have not gotten it to work yet.
Okay. It's kind of not quite related to networking, but is it an Android or an iPad?
Android.
Okay. Well, I'm wondering, Kim, could you find the link to the Zoom system requirements for virtual backgrounds and post that in chat? Because if you have to download the Zoom app on your device. I
did that.
Yeah, and you but we do a class on Zoom virtual backgrounds. Actually, that's coming up at 11:30. And so if you're interested in learning how to do it with a tablet, now your tablet may or may not be possible to use Zoom with virtual backgrounds. There's a technical performance requirement. Some brands of tablets do and some don't. So, but I go over that.
Oh.
So it's a little more picky with Android tablets. But welcome to the world of technology where you have to figure out all these things for yourself, right? It's like, it's hard to find help. So I'm going to try and help you with home networks, okay? And some of the terminologies and how your home network works. So you at least have a little better understanding of your home network, okay? So let me share a few slides. And we have a nice size group today. So if you want to, stop for any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself. Generally, it's a little better if we stay muted, but we have a good group today. Sometimes microphones pick up a little bit of noise, so we might have to just mute everybody if we get that. But so far, everyone's being pretty good about it, so I appreciate that. So we're going to talk about home networks. I'm going to explain a little bit about home networks. I'm Bob Cohen, your guide, and Sunday is my t-shirt day. So this is normally I wear a shirt with a collar, but Sunday is my casual day for Get Set Up. And I went to college out here in California, but I was born in the Midwest in Chicago. I worked in the technology industry really my whole career and started doing training at community colleges in 2007, running technology classes for people. And I'm just hoping to make technology a little bit simpler to understand. Okay, so as you know from Get Set Up, we do have a curriculum we follow. We run through these courses. We cover a certain amount of subject material. So if we have time, sometimes we can vary off the topic, but we want to make sure we cover all the material that everybody joined in from the description. If you're joining by live stream, we encourage you to join us for a class at getsetup.io. Register, it's a free account. You can always request a recording after class at help@getsetup.io. We are recording the session. And Get Set Up is not paid to promote any products, services, or brands, but we're going to mention a few things just to help you understand technology, okay? So part of technology is learning a little bit of vocabulary. And so we're going to learn some things about network ABCs. You're going to get a better understanding, I hope, of what a network is and some networks you might already be familiar with. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about routers and Ethernet and Wi-Fi. And then we'll have some things that might help you in solving some problems like reaching an area of that you might need to, or having a device not connecting to a network. Connecting to the network is really valuable because that's how we get to the internet. So based on the agenda, are there any questions about the agenda or the topics we're going to be covering today that anyone has? Okay, great. All right, so let me go through the explanation of what is a network. A network is a collection of computers or devices that connect by wires or cables. I'm going to turn on my mouse cursor so I can draw with things. So wires, cables, or wireless. Marconi is the scientist that's credited with inventing radio. And he was Italian and he invented it in Italy. And the first thing he was able to transmit over radio was a dot and a dash from Morse code. Morse code was used a lot by telegraph operators, but it worked on wires. Okay, they had physical wires that connected two telegraph stations together. And then Marconi created this thing called radio, where devices could send and receive information wirelessly. And networking for computers uses wireless networks. They're all called radio waves because they're part of the electromagnetic spectrum that is considered radio. Okay, light waves is one, ultraviolet's another, infrared, radio. We don't see radio waves, but they are part of the electromagnetic spectrum. And some really smart people figured out how to transmit dots and dashes and more information over those radio waves. Pretty neat if you ever want to get a little history of how things were invented. I like to learn how they were invented. So why would you want a network? Okay. Anybody still have VHS tapes in their home? Yeah. Okay. When was the last time you played a VHS movie on your system, right? You might not have done it for a while. We might have flash drives that we use. We might have CDs. People still have a lot of CDs. Anybody have any 8-track tapes around? Remember the 8-track tapes that were around in cars for a while?
Yeah.
Okay. These are forms of electronic information. whether it's on tape or on disc or on an LP record or something, it's information that is in a form of physical media. Okay. And what networking has done is it's eliminated the need for you to use physical media. So you don't really have to do a lot of things to carry around a movie. You get movies from things like Netflix, and you get music from Spotify or iTunes or things like that. And so it really changes a lot about how you might get things, because networks make it possible for you to move information around without having physical media like floppy drives or disk drives that you might have to move. Remember when you used to have a floppy drive, if you wanted to move data from one computer to another, you'd make a copy of a file on a floppy drive and you'd give it to a friend and hope that they didn't get a virus, from that floppy drive, right? For some reason. And so we don't do that anymore. We do things over networks that send and receive information electronically.
Can I ask a question? Where does Alexa fit in here?
I'm sorry, Yvonne, could you repeat that, please?
Where does Alexa fit in?
Alexa.
Alexa.
You have to excuse me. She started because I have one in my office with me. She is something called a device. Okay, so in 2 slides, I'm going to talk about devices. Okay.
Thank you.
And we'll talk about Alexa. That's a good question though, because we start connecting a lot of things to networks. Now, networks work really, really well when they are simple and easy for people to use. The telephone network is an easy and simple network to use. You pick up a handset, you dial a number, and somehow or another magic happens and you're connected to the other person on the other end of the phone line. Electric power is a network. You go and buy a coffee maker or a lamp at a store, you bring it home, you plug it in, it works, right? Networks that are good just work. Your cell phone, okay, whether it's a smartphone or not a simple cell phone, you go to a cell phone store, and when you have a reception where you get a cell phone tower nearby, you can use your cell phone or smartphone to get on your cellular network from your cellular company. And then radio, you probably still have a radio in your car. I do. And I turn on news stations when I'm driving just to keep up on news sometimes. And so that's a wireless network, isn't it? Radio is a wireless network. And then television, we used to have rabbit ears, more and more, but now we typically have cable television or something like that. But television's a network. You turn it on, you tune into a channel, you see a picture, and you get sound on your screen. Pretty amazing things that we take for granted. These just work. I mean, there's lots of networks, okay? So these are just some networks you probably didn't think about as networks, but you do know these and you do know how they work.
Mm-hmm.
So you're a network expert already and you didn't know it, right? You just don't think of these things as networks, but they really are. Any questions about those? They're pretty common networks. Everybody probably used one every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what confuses people are these things called data networks. Data networks are just other types of networks. They just, instead of moving a radio sound or a television picture or a phone number, a voice conversation, they move digital information. They actually move zeros and ones, and they're just billions and billions of zeros and ones that travel over an electric cable or through a satellite, or through other types of things, okay? Wi-Fi is part of Ethernet. So Ethernet is the big data network. And it's what most data moves over, and it can be cable or Wi-Fi. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Bluetooth is another type of network, and GPS is another one. And sometimes you've got some home automation things. The important thing is that for an Ethernet device to connect up to another Ethernet device, they both have to have Ethernet technology built into them. If they connect up via Bluetooth, they both have to have Bluetooth built into them. So you can connect two Bluetooth devices or two Ethernet devices, or your phone has a chip that receives information from GPS satellites that tells it its location. And sometimes some home automation devices have their own types of networks too. So the main thing is that if you got to put a square peg in a square hole. It's got to fit. Okay. If you try and put a Ethernet cable into a telephone cable outlet, it's not going to fit. It doesn't fit. And so each type of network has its own standards for how it communicates with, and you just have to have both devices connecting. Any questions about that? That's I think pretty good, easy to understand, is that if you can't, I like the square peg in the square hole analogy. I haven't used that one before, but kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Okay.
Yeah.
So Yvonne, to answer your question about the Amazon Smart Assistant, that name begins with an A. Okay. And I don't want to say her name because I'll turn her on my desk. We have these things called computers. We have phones that are called smartphones now. We have tablets that are other types of devices. We have printers that connect up to networks. We have TVs that are called smart TVs because they connect up to networks. And we have some of these other devices like Amazon, Google Home, Apple TV, Siri, things like that. An Amazon Echo device is usually a cylindrical device, and it has a speaker and it has a microphone where it can pick up your voice and you talk into it, and it connects up to the internet using Wi-Fi. Okay, so the smart assistant doesn't exist here inside the box. The smart assistant exists somewhere out here in Amazon land. Okay. I'll write her name. Okay. So when you connect up to the internet, that's how you communicate. All this device has on it is a little processor and a microphone and a speaker. And so you connect this to the internet by doing some things in your home that make it connect to the internet. They're pretty good devices when they work. When everything works right, it's really pretty good. But these days, I have a smart washer and dryer. It's not as smart as I would like it. What it does is it tells me when a load is done through an app on my phone. It tells me when it's time to run a cleaning cycle, because it's one of these front loading ones that it's supposed to run a cleaning cycle. And it tells me when it needs maintenance, when it's supposed to clean out the filter. Not bad, I mean, the really smart washer and dryer would automatically switch the load from the washer to the dryer. And somebody else on a class said a really smart dryer would fold your laundry for you and put it away. But you see, a lot of these things say they're smart and they connect up to Wi-Fi, your internet at home, but what do they do, right? That's the really important thing. I think we'll start to see more things. The maintenance isn't too bad because it reminds me when it's time to run a cleaning cycle.
Bob?
I probably wouldn't do it otherwise.
Bob, what does Wi-Fi stand for?
Wi-Fi actually stands for wireless fidelity. And you
Oh,
say,
thank you.
"Wow, where did you get that from?" Right? Well, it came from the world of networks, okay, and wire from high fidelity networks, because originally it was planned for use by stereo people that made stereo systems and stuff like that. They wanted a technology for broadcasting stereo music wirelessly in people's homes, and they came up with Wi-Fi, but it got kind of absconded with by the computer industry because that was taking off at the time.
Thank you.
Sure. Where does all this stuff go? And you talked about connecting with Amazon Smart Assistant or Siri, or when you browse the web. What happens is that you get out eventually on the internet to something called a data center. Now, your data centers are facilities for computers. They're connected to the internet. They're owned by people like Apple and Google and Amazon and Microsoft and Facebook and government. So when you're going out to the internet over your internet service provider, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, they are getting you from your home out to the internet. So you have a home network, and then you have the internet service provider that takes you to the internet network. So if you looked at, here's home, okay, and then you have a connection that gets you from your home to your internet service provider, your ISP, and they typically will put some kind of a box or device in your home. The ISP then gets you out to the internet. That's their job. They're called an internet service provider. So whenever you have any problems connecting the internet, your internet service provider is one of the people you should get a hold of. All right, let's learn some ABCs of networking. The internet. The internet is a collection of connected computers. Well, when you connect to the internet, you are part of the internet also, okay? And so you become part of this big worldwide collection of connected computers and devices, because some things are computers and some things are called devices. Well, one of the things that happened with the internet that made it a lot easier for people to use was this thing called the World Wide Web. Okay, and it was invented. At one time it didn't exist, but the internet, there were computers and cables, and some smart people invented something called a uniform resource locator, which is an address for a web page, just like you have a post office address that you use when you want to tell somebody, oh, this is what you can use for my mailing address. That's how they would send a letter to you, right? And if you want to send a letter to somebody else or a package to somebody else, you would ask them for their address. Well, the internet has an addressing scheme. It is called URLs. And all of these website pieces of information like www.google.com or getsetup.io, they are addresses on the internet that help them get found. So if you, instead of putting a envelope in a letter and putting a stamp on it, you go to your web browser and you type in an address and you click, enter, and your computer goes out, finds the address, and then comes back with the web page for you, right? And it's like magic. No matter where in the world it is, it'll find it, okay? Well, computers don't like words as much as they like numbers, okay? So computers generally work with numbers, and there's this thing called the Internet Protocol address, short IP address, okay? And it is a specific or computer or a device that's on the internet, and it gets a number. And there's an international standards organization that determines how numbers get assigned, and your internet service provider gives you the numbers for your devices in your home. So all of the things you connect up to the internet get a IP address. And so you have a return address when you want to send something out or receive something. The internet knows where it came from and how to send it back. And that's what the purpose of an IP address is to help make sure that things get to their destination, just like the post office uses a name, street number, street name, city, state, and zip code to make sure things get delivered. The internet uses IP addresses to make sure things get delivered. That's how they get delivered. Okay, so what happens in your home? Okay, at your home, most of your technology is going to use Ethernet. Okay, it's the computer industry standard, and there's two options that are very common: wired and wireless. And just like I said, you know, the square peg in a square hole, an Ethernet cable actually has a technical specification in order for it to be called an Ethernet cable. It has so many wires in it. The connector has to be a certain size and shape. The length has to be, you know, a certain length. And so every computer that comes with an Ethernet connector will accept an Ethernet cable. It's like the power cable, you know, for AC power. It's standard, it works, okay? And any device that communicates with Ethernet can send and receive information with another device that receives Ethernet. Wi-Fi, for wireless fidelity from the hi-fi industry, is just the wireless version of Ethernet. That's all it is. It is still Ethernet. It's just wireless over radio wave, just like Morse code. You could transmit Morse code over an electric cable, or you can send it wirelessly, right? So it could be both ways. It's just a different way of sending the information, wired or wireless, but it's still Ethernet. And that's what you use. I actually worked for the company that was involved in establishing the Ethernet standard. And when you think about it, it's not that old in terms of the history of life. It started to get developed in the early 1970s. So it's really not that old a technology. And then it was made a standard in about the late 70s, about 1980, 81. And, 3 companies developed it. One of them's out of business, Digital Equipment Corporation. For those of you that wherever in New England, you might know them. And Xerox, which was the copier machine company, and Intel, which made chips. They were the 3 companies that established the Ethernet standard. And it made it possible for computers to talk to each other as long as everybody used the Ethernet standard, instead of having one standard for IBM and another standard for another company. Imagine if you bought a Ford, and if you bought a Ford, the Ford had to use a certain brand of gas that was only sold at Ford dealers and not gasoline you could get at any gas station. And you bought a Chevy, or you bought that had a different kind of gas, and Toyota had a different kind of gas. It would make it really hard for people to use cars, wouldn't it? And so by having standards like the internal combustion engine and gasoline octane ratings, you can pretty much pull into any gas station, no matter what brand of car you got, unless it's electric, obviously, but pretty much get gas, right? And count on it. And so that's what standards do. Ethernet is a standard just like that. Just like your power, your AC power is a standard, and other things are standards. Even construction industry has standards. You know, if you have an older building, it's hard to find things that are standard, but a newer building typically has things that are built doors are a certain width, ceilings are a certain height. Things are certain, there are certain standards for construction. Ethernet is just one of those standards. Now, your home router is what gives you the ability to use Ethernet in your home. This is a picture of my home router, and they're all a little bit different, okay? Some will have antennas. They might have none. They might have one. They might have three, like this. The antennas are for the Wi-Fi part of the network. They broadcast and receive radio waves over the Wi-Fi frequencies. And you know how radio stations have frequencies, like you tune into 1040 or 920 or 1610 or whatever. Well, Wi-Fi has two frequencies. The Federal Communications Commission actually regulates what frequencies are used by different technologies. So radio has a frequency, television has a frequency, and Wi-Fi has a frequency. There's actually two of them. One is called 2.4 gigahertz and another is called 5 gigahertz. Older devices might only have this. When I say older, like 6, 7, 8 years old, might only have 2.4 gigahertz. Most new devices have 5 gigahertz. It's the frequency of the radio waves that go up and down. And if there's 5 of them, 1,000 in a certain range, it's 5 gigahertz, right? So that's what these antennas do, is they broadcast and receive the Wi-Fi signal. So if you have a device that does not have an Ethernet cable to plug into, like the cables plug into these ports. So many devices do not come with an Ethernet cable connector, right? They connect over Wi-Fi. So you would connect it wirelessly to your home router. And we're going to talk about how that's done. These Ethernet ports are for connecting cables, okay? If you had a home computer or a TV or something that would connect up to an Ethernet cable, you would plug it in here and you'd plug the other end into the device. There's often one special connector. It's a different color. It's separated from the rest. This connects to your internet service provider, your ISP, and it might connect up through a box called a modem. Okay, a modem is another box that converts Ethernet to whatever the ISP needs to get it out to their facility. And sometimes, because sometimes your ISP might run a cable line to your home, if they're like mine, Spectrum, Charter does that. They might run a fiber optic cable. So there's a box sometimes called a modem that is provided by your internet service provider. And sometimes that box includes the router. Sometimes the router and the modem are separate boxes. It's either way works. It's just that it depends on your particular internet service provider, how they do it. And if they provide you with the router, they will help make sure it works properly and manage it for you, okay? And each internet service provider has a different way of getting to the router. Some have a website, some have a controls that you use to log into the router when you have a computer connected up by cable. Some let you connect up by Wi-Fi, but rarely will you have to log in and manage it. Your ISP usually does that unless you buy your own router. Any questions about a router? People, would you think you'd recognize your router if you looked for it in your home? Look for some box that has antennas and some Ethernet cable connectors, and that's your router. Okay, it has to be plugged into the wall, so it operates off electrics.
Okay.
So
So that's usually how you get your cable, through the cable company?
When you get your internet service, you'll usually get it from a cable company or a telephone company like or Frontier or AT&T,
Mm-hmm.
who runs a cable to your home. Do you know what your internet service is, Loretta?
AT&T. AT&T.
Boy, okay, you got it down, right? So AT&T runs a cable to your home. They probably gave you a box in your home somewhere that's a modem
Mm-hmm.
or a modem and a router, okay? And they are responsible for getting anything in your home to the internet. That's what they do. They're an internet service provider.
Well, I had got new carpet and they had to unplug all the stuff and they left and none of my TVs worked. On the phone with AT&T for like 2 hours for them to try to get my TVs to work. It was crazy.
It can be sometimes, yes.
Yes, it's too much. I don't work for you all.
Yeah. Do you need both the router and the modem for service of the internet? Usually, yes, your computer devices connect up to the router. Your internet service uses a modem of some sort to get their internet into your home. So you, like I say, it might be one box, one piece of hardware, or it might be two separate pieces of hardware. But if it might be a combined modem router box where it's just a single box, that you have, where the box is both a modem and a router, combined. Or it might just be a router and a separate modem, okay? But you do need both of them for the internet to work in your home. Now, what is this stuff that's happening here, okay? Well, most of the time we connect up via Wi-Fi, okay? A Wi-Fi network is created by your router and it gives your network a name. This was my Spectrum router and they gave it a name called My Spectrum Wi-Fi 54-2G. That actually stands for 2.4 gigahertz, and it has the same name, whether it's, it might just have a 5G for a 5G name. And they give you something called a network key, which is also the password. Now, I apologize for technical people. Okay. For some reason, the technical people that made up the name for the password for routers started calling it originally a network key for Wi-Fi, but it's really the same. And now they've started calling them passwords. So whenever you see a little lock on a network, and I'm going to show you on my phone, whenever you see a padlock on a network, that indicates the network requires a key or a password. So when you see the word network key and password, they mean the same thing. Okay, don't get confused by it. Okay. And so that's what they'll give you for your router. And we're going to take a look at them. Okay. Okay, so your internet service is going to take, they're going to connect you up to the internet with oftentimes a modem or a router, just depends on whether it's one box or two boxes. And your devices connect up to Wi-Fi or the cable connections. And the key thing is just find the SSID name that you need to connect up to the network. And once you find the SSID and you enter the password, most of the time your device will remember everything on it. It will remember the settings that you used for it. Okay. So I'm going to switch my screen sharing for a second here to my smartphone to show you on my smartphone what it looks like. Okay. Thanks, Kim. Okay, so I'm in the settings of my smartphone. I happen to use an iPhone. And so if I look at my iPhone, I've got a gear for settings. If I tap on the gear, that gives me the ability to see my Wi-Fi. And right now I'm connected to the network. Okay, usually there's a little Wi-Fi indicator up at the top of your phone that tells you you're connected to Wi-Fi. And so if I tap on the Wi-Fi indicator, I'm going to change this to a little red dot here. If I tap on this, it opens up a menu that tells me, yes, Wi-Fi is on.
Mm-hmm.
These are the signals I'm picking up and how strong they are. And these are some of the names. These are the SSIDs. These are the network Wi-Fi names. And it'll pick up whatever it can receive. I mean, if the signal is strong enough to pick up my neighbor Helen's 2G network, it'll pick it up. If it is strong enough to pick up somebody's Netgear or Loretta's network, across the street from me, it'll pick up her network. Now I can't get on it because you see it's got a little padlock and I don't know her password. Okay? But
Mhm.
I do know my password. I called my network Bobology. I renamed my router. Okay. And so if I turn Wi-Fi off, my phone can still get out to the internet through cellular, but not through Wi-Fi. And you usually want to use Wi-Fi. It's better, it's cheaper, it's faster.
Bob, I have a
Yeah.
question. Why are you seeing everyone else's Wi-Fi?
I'm sorry?
Why are you seeing everyone else's Wi-Fi?
Oh, well, because it's a radio wave. It's like they're broadcasting a little radio signal from their antennas. So their routers have antennas. And when you have a radio signal that broadcasts, it doesn't just go in a straight line. It broadcasts everything in,
It covers the area.
right? It covers an area. So if my home is here and their home is here, I would still pick up the signal.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Sure. Microwave. Have you ever seen microwaves on building towers, Yvonne? Microwave
I have.
towers on top of
Yes, I have.
buildings?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, microwaves have to be pointed in a specific direction. And so they don't broadcast in a circle like Wi-Fi does. Wi-Fi broadcasts in a circle so that
Right.
you'll just pick up what's near your neighbor. So if I turn Wi-Fi on here and let me turn it on, it'll automatically, because I entered my password key once, for my key for my network, but I've never entered one for Netgear 98. So if I go to this one and try and get on, it asks me for the password.
Mhm.
And I don't know it, so I can't get on. So whenever you're in a Starbucks or a coffee shop or a library
Mhm.
or wherever that has a Wi-Fi network, you can find it by going to your Wi-Fi settings, and you'll see it under other networks. And as long as you have the password, it's available to you. Who was I with? Where was I with that had a free Wi-Fi? I can't remember, but some places they don't require a password.
Mhm.
But most do, or most require you, like if you're using one in a coffee shop now, they typically require you to give them your email. Oh, I think it was maybe it was in Target that I had to give them my email in order to use their Wi-Fi. But then you can use the Wi-Fi in their store. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at something else while we're on my phone, because a question came up and it's a good time. So Luann asks, my settings has network speed 117 megabits per second. Well, the frequency that the network communicates over is not the speed of the network. It's just the frequency of the radio waves. So it's not telling you how fast your network is. The speed of your network is something you would measure with a speed test application or a just a speed test website. And I have a couple of apps set up on my phone here. Okay. Let's do a speed test and I'll talk about password and router change. Okay, so if I launch this one app, it's called speedtest.net, and I tap go, it's going to check how fast my network is for download speeds. Download means it's coming from the internet to me, and it's going to test it for upload speeds, meaning when I push something from, say I want to upload a picture to Facebook, that's an upload. Or I want to, send somebody an email, that's an upload, okay? And so it tells me, on most consumer internet services, they give you really, really fast download speeds. And for something like Zoom or Netflix, you need about 3 or 4 megabits per second. That's how many millions of bits of data per second are coming to you. And upload, you usually only need 3 or 4. I upgraded my service so I have higher upload speeds so that I have the ability to run better, cleaner Zoom meetings because I do so much training.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yeah, Edmund.
Are they all roughly the same, or is there any one or a few that are better than the others to use?
Well,
as far as accuracy.
As far as what they're going to give you, let me get out of this screen for a second, okay? And what they're going to give you is they're going to give you a maximum download speed. You will get up to, say, 100 megabits per second. I only need like 5 or 10 for using Netflix or Zoom. So 100 megabits per second should be pretty good, but they say up to because it might go up or down during the day depending on how many people are using the internet. Okay, and so they're all very similar in pricing, as long as you're in a major city. If you get out to some more rural areas, like I have some family that live in Spencer, Iowa, population 2,000. They pay a little bit more for high-speed internet, okay? But if you're in a major city and you've got a cable or AT&T or Verizon or other people, you'll get pretty much comparable service.
Okay.
Mia had a question. Can you change the password on your router and modem? Yes, you can. That's a little more technical than what we get into today. If your router is provided to you by your internet service, I'd recommend you contact them and get or visit their website or call their technical support and change your password on your router or modem. If you bought your own router or modem, you can get instructions from the company that made it. Okay. Now, some organizations give you better technical support than others, and it depends. So I'm going to talk about extra devices and extending range, but let me talk about first of all about this company called Wirecutter. I use Wirecutter a lot. I wish I could take credit for having found them, but my daughter-in-law told me about them. Wirecutter's a review website. There's others out there too. Consumer Reports, which is a nonprofit, and I find that they're a little better than the reviews you get on Amazon for products. Sometimes, if you're trying to get a simpler explanation of what's a good brand to buy, what's a good device to buy, Consumer Reports and Wirecutter really give you some good advice. And Wirecutter has a section for electronics that they call networking. Okay. And this is a great place to learn more. Okay. Everybody's on the grid. If you're on the internet, you're on the grid. But some people do live off the grid, so it's a little bit of a challenge, but you can do it. And they do have some advice for different types of technologies. Okay. So if you need if you're interested about VPN or how to get reliable Wi-Fi in your home, the best Wi-Fi router. Okay. And you can even get USB adapters for Wi-Fi on your computer if it doesn't have it built in or if yours is broken. And so they talk about all types of things related to networking, and they'll give you pretty simple advice. They'll tell you what they think the best is all around, and they explain what might work. So they say if you were going to buy a router, this is the one they do recommend. And if you are interested in a less expensive one, or their main pick's unavailable, and if money was no object, this is the ultimate one you could buy if you wanted to. Okay. And so they do a pretty good job. Consumer Reports does them as well. And so there are some good tips. You're going to get the link to Wirecutter in the email after class. And so it's something I go to, and that's the reason I was sharing it. Okay, so there's 3 technologies that sometimes help. One of the challenges people have sometimes is in extending the range of their network. How do they get their network into a room that doesn't seem to get a strong signal? Remember when I think Yvonne asked about the signal we get? We get a signal that starts out as a little circle and gets bigger, and it starts, broadcasting wider range. Well, as you get further away from the center, the signal goes down. Well, let me get a better line here, okay? The signal goes down in strength. So distance, this is distance, and this is the signal strength. So if you get more than, sometimes you go into the other side of the house or you go to the backyard and you lose your Wi-Fi signal. If you're wondering why, it's because the amount of the signal goes down in strength. Routers and anything that broadcasts a radio wave are regulated by the Federal Communications Commission. The Federal Communications Commission has safety regulations that say if you're broadcasting a radio signal like Wi-Fi, you can only broadcast something this strong. And that's, so Wi-Fi signals can only go so far before they become too weak to be effective. And you may have a situation in your home where you have a weak signal. Okay. There's 3 price ranges of solutions. One is the Wi-Fi range selection. This is under about $50. Then there's a power line range extender. These are under about $100. And then there's a mesh network, and these range from about $200 to $400. These are for people that say, I get a weak signal in a part of my home and I want to make it stronger. These they all plug into power outlets, so you do need a power outlet, but a Wi-Fi range extender will plug in to a power outlet. It'll pick up the signal from your existing router and rebroadcast it. So you get another range, another extended range of it. So it picks up if it can pick up a signal, it'll, if you plug it in here in this space, if you plug it in here, here's your router, here's your range extender. It has enough to pick up the signal, but it'll rebroadcast its own range. Okay, so it just rebroadcasts it. It's like a repeater. It rebroadcasts it. Okay. This power line plugs into the wall and actually uses your electric power circuits in your home to extend the range. and it works really well. You connect a cable to your router, a cable, and plug it into your wall, and this gives you a cable connector on the other end. And then there's this thing called a whole home network if you want to extend coverage to your whole home. Those are tips for extending range. And then these are some tips for isolating problems. Lots of times, if a device doesn't seem to work right on the network, check the settings. That's where you have to find it to make sure it works. Sometimes powering it off and powering it back on works. And if you're having problems with slow speeds or other issues, your internet service provider can provide help for you. It's difficult to troubleshoot a network on your own. Your ISP can help you isolate problems a lot. So we've covered some network ABCs, some things about routers, which is kind of basics. This is a class made for basics. Some things about Wi-Fi and internet and solving a few problems. Let me do some wrap-up slides and I'll take some closing questions, okay? I do recommend the cloud classes we've got. They're really good. I do classes on Windows 10 and the App Store and a few other things. I'm doing a class a little later today on virtual backgrounds on Zoom. I do a Microsoft 365 class. You're going to get an email which will have class notes. There'll be some class recommendations, and we encourage feedback for you. And now when you register for a class, you can invite a friend. So if you think of a friend that, oh, you know, so-and-so would probably be interested in this class, right? When you register for the class, you can send them an email and let them know about it as well. So if you've got suggestions or for a class or ideas, send us an email at help@getsetup.io or put it in the comments. We read all of our feedback, comments, and other things. You can request a session recording as well. And raise your hand if you learned something new today. Okay, let me see anybody learned something. People learned something new today. All right, that's good. That's good. Well, I'm gonna be on. Any questions that you have? I know we've covered a lot of material, but hopefully you have a better understanding of networks now and what in the world they are, and it takes a little bit of the mystery out of them, huh?
Right on.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, because I want you to all become as smart on technology as you can so you get less afraid of it. Remember, your technology should work for you. You shouldn't have to work for your technology.
Very good.
I'd like to ask a question.
Yeah, who has a question?
This is
Edmund.
Kath. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Micro cell towers, are they still really useful?
Micro cell towers. Boy, I haven't heard that name in a long time, Edmund. Boy. Okay, so when you had what micro cell towers did, for those of you that don't know, is some people lived in areas that they got a very weak cellular signal from their cell phone company, like AT&T or Verizon or something. And a microcell tower was a little box they would sell you that would connect up to your internet at home, and it would rebroadcast a cellular signal so your cell phone will get a stronger signal at home. I don't see that many of them out there, but I'm sure they're still made. I mean, if you were, I know some people, I used to teach classes at a community college near the Sierra Nevadas, and people lived on the hills and they didn't get good internet and good cell signals. And so they had cell phone, repeaters like you're talking about. But it's only if you get a weak cellular signal that you might need them in the first place.
This is
Kathy, go
Kathy.
ahead.
I have a question regarding the use of Ethernet versus Wi-Fi. When you are, for instance, when you're doing a Zoom call and all of a sudden, you have maybe 15 people on the call, and all of a sudden you get a message across your screen that says your connection is becoming unstable. does it do any good to go to the Ethernet if your laptop will allow it to go directly to Ethernet instead of Wi-Fi?
That's really a smart thing to think about, because generally, even though Wi-Fi, you can do the speed test to see if your Wi-Fi is fast enough. Okay.
Right.
And as you get more people on a Zoom meeting, your internet is getting used up more. But
Okay.
so generally, at GetSeta, for example, we do recommend for all of our guides, when possible, to use a cable connection for networking as opposed to Wi-Fi.
Okay.
And that will often help you out, but may not always. But it's definitely something you can try. It might solve that problem if you're getting it frequently.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mia, did you have a question? Or you just had your hand up because you learned something new today?
The latter.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Mia. Appreciate that. Okay, so we've had a great class today. If you learned one thing, I think it was an hour well spent. I learned a few things as well from some of the questions and the types of things that people are curious about. Kim, our teaching assistant, thank you for answering questions in chat. We appreciate your help with that as well. And we will say goodbye until our next class together, or we see each other later on Get Set Up. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Bob.
Bye.